call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There we go. First item of business, of course, is to approve the agenda.
Did I hear there were going to be some changes to it, or no?
Yes, proposed changes are the two items being crossed out and then substituting and adding two additional things that are in bold on the copies that you have.
Okay. And that's on the new agenda?
Yeah, that's on the one you have now.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Congratulations.
We do need a second. Does Justin have an? Well, I'll let Justin make his announcement in a minute. We got to we got to vote first. Procedure. Yeah, we got to have a second. Yeah.
Second.
Okay, now we've got a second. Now we can vote. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed? Justin, do you have an announcement to make?
Yeah, so Saturday morning at 12:30 we had our baby, little boy, William Robert, named after Robin's grandfather and my grandfather. So yeah, he was 8 pounds, 13 ounces, and
Ooh,
20 and a
big
quarter
boy.
inches long. So yeah, so everything is good. So it's been a sleepless weekend, but other than that, it's been
Pretty much.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wyatt's taking care of him?
Yeah, it was funny. We were at the hospital, and he wanted he was so excited to see him. And one of the nurses was there, and she said, "Well, so are you coming to see your little brother?" And he goes, "Yeah, baby popped out of mommy's tummy finally." So he was pretty excited.
Okay. Back to more mundane matters. We need to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. They look good.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. How many folks are there that would like to do public comment? Okay. The hands came up simultaneously. I'll mentally flip a coin and, okay. Yeah, come on. Come on up, and if that microphone isn't on, while there's a button there to turn it on, doesn't make any difference. Okay, thank you, Jeff. And your name and where you're from, and then we'll go, and then you can go ahead.
My name is Jordan Gerard. I am from Spring Grove. I'm the editor of the Spring Grove Herald. Thank you, commissioners. I just wanted to inform the board that the Herald has also had issues getting records from the Houston County Agricultural Society. We've asked for agendas, minutes, and other materials pertaining to an issue we've had since 2017 and now in 2018. We've been met with no response when requesting the material. We'd like to know what legal obligations the Agricultural Society has when it comes to open records, because they are a county agricultural society, which under Minnesota state law, they are considered a public body of government that is subject to open record laws. However, now they are a 501c3 group, and those groups are generally not. Formerly, they were a county agricultural society before they got that 501c3 status, meaning their records should be public. Now, they're that group, and it gets a little more complicated. We'd really like to know why they decided to go with 2 former employees of ours with publication of the Exhibitor's Guide. You might know it as that 40-page publication that comes out before the fair in the summer. After they were forewarned about working with those 2 individuals. It concerns local advertisers' dollars and the fact that the Agricultural Society hired the 2 former employees who used stolen materials to produce the Exhibitor's Guide, which resulted in those 2 individuals having to settle out of court for breach in terms of conditions with Metro Creative Graphics, which is our artwork company. They provide the clip art that you see on our ads and in our paper sometimes. After reading the Caledonia Argus's article last week, or would be this week, from the county board meeting, I was surprised to hear other individuals, including county commissioners, also had trouble receiving records from them. Furthermore, if a person has never been to the Agricultural Society meetings, the meeting time is not listed on its website. So if you've never been to one, you don't know what time it starts. If its meetings are open to the public, as they seem to be, the time needs to be listed. I encourage the county board to ask for more accountability from the Agricultural Society. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan. Yeah. Mr. Kumichael, I believe.
Good evening, Commissioners. Bruce Kumichael from Caledonia. Four things. Number one,
I noticed you double counted.
I thought I lost one in the table saw accident. I want to thank Commissioner Jack Miller for organizing the Skype meeting with Organic Valley early this afternoon in the CJC basement. It was pretty well attended, I think. And I think we got some good rough background in our heads about solar, and I thought it was very informative for me anyway. Appreciate it very much.
You're welcome.
I'd like two clarifications, if at all possible, with regard to the 2019 Commissioners Board meeting schedule. It's proposed that there be just 2 open meetings per month. I assume the first and third Tuesdays, apparently, depending upon calendar schedule, all starting at 9:30 in the morning. That means that there wouldn't be any evening meeting at all for the entire next year. Just wondering if that's what needs to happen, because there isn't that much of attendance to the 5:30 meetings that we've had, or what would be the reason for not having any evening meetings?
Well, obviously, this is still open for discussion here
Yeah.
because we haven't acted on it. So,
Well, I wanted to get my 2 cents
yeah,
in with.
you're getting your 2 cents worth in ahead of time, and we appreciate that. It's not set in stone yet.
Okay.
We still have to discuss it. So thank you for your input on that, Bruce.
And the second clarification regarding the schedule is when a Tuesday is not scheduled for a full board meeting, it's called a work group for maybe policy review, strategic planning, program overviews, and things like that. Would the full board, or at least a quorum of the board, be involved in those meetings, and would that conflict with the open meeting law?
That is set up, I think,
I can address
our administrator spent some time working on that with administrators in the area, and the idea is, yes, the board, the vast majority of the board, probably all of us, will be here for those meetings, and obviously they're open meetings. Other counties do this work session on a regular basis. I take the Winona paper, I read about the Winona County Board having those meetings, and I read what was discussed there in the Winona paper on a regular basis. And I'm sure that's our plan.
And would those work groups occur at approximately the same time as
Yes.
a regular? Okay. And the fourth point, if I may, with regard to what's coming up in your action plan.
Excuse me, Bruce. Would you like to add something to what I said, Jeff?
No, that's fine. That covers it. Yeah, they would be open meetings, just like you've done strategic meetings
Yeah.
in the past. So.
Okay. I'm sorry, Bruce. I
Within
needed to
your
make
action
sure.
Items number 7, approve salary changes for confidential non-union staff members. Are those salary changes going to be based upon a full acknowledgement of union settlements, or a percentage of that, or less than the union settlement, like 2.5% or
I think that's what we're going to be
1.4%.
discussing this So I haven't.
We discussed that later this evening. We will be discussing that later this evening.
Well, then I might as well say what I'm going to say right now, not knowing what you're going to decide to do, but I would hope that you wouldn't give them the same percentage increases as the union, because it's kind of like the little red hen. They're doing all the work, and I don't think everybody else should be eating the cake.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Fine, we'll move on with the agenda then. No, we've got action items. First one, approve claims.
I'll make a motion to approve the claims.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. And item 2, approve final acceptance, etc.
I'll make a motion to approve the final acceptance for bridge replacements as stated.
Brian?
Is it, I'll second it, but then is that something you
Brian
want to
can
address?
Does Brian need to? Yeah. Your name wasn't beside it, and so I was, all of a sudden I realized, hey, that's the bridge thing.
So, County Administrator and I had a discussion on this as far as if it should be on the appointment schedule or action items, and, you know, not knowing what the board would want to see. So these are 2 bridge replacement projects. One is bridge replacement on County Road 12, just outside of Caledonia. The other one is on Looney Valley Road up in Houston Township. One contract had both these bridges together into one project. The original contract amount was $368,181, and the work certified is $397,796.40. So it was fairly substantial overrun on this project, well within the margin of allowance from our state funding sources. The overage was primarily due to extra rock, both on the road surface side and some riprap to protect some slopes. And then there was some erosion control items on some erosion control blanket that was swapped out and changed. So that was the primary costs. Overall, the contractor did a great job on both projects, and vegetation's established. State has signed off on the final work. So county would like to make a final payment to close this project out.
Any questions?
I already made the motion and Jack
I
seconded it.
seconded it.
So if there's no discussion, well then, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Approve video visitation system repair, replace a server.
Yeah, just a motion for this purchase. I sent all of you the email or the information in the board package. This is the server, or the brain of the system that controls the video teleconferencing for visitation to the jail. And system was installed new with the building, and the server is dying and needs to be replaced. So, unfortunately, it's a pricey piece of equipment.
Okay.
Is there a budget?
Yeah, it's within budget and in this year. So.
Need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the replacing the server.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. I better keep track here. There's a big list. Okay. Jeff, do you want to talk about that trailer replacement?
Yeah, and I apologize if you didn't see it yet. I did send it late this afternoon. This is something originally started working on with Rick Frank before he retired. We have a total of 3 trailers that we use for the recycling program primarily. The 3 are focused on the tire collection. Two of those trailers were in rough shape. One of them was not salvageable, and we have since auctioned it off. The second one was repaired and will limp along for a while, but operating with just 2 of them is not working real well. And so we need a third one. Aaron and folks have been looking hard to find the right combination of an older used trailer, but one that still has plenty of life left into it, so we don't have to sink a bunch of money into fixing it. They recently came across one that's about 11,000, maybe 12, under 12,000. Sure, the total price will be on it yet, but it has a current DOT inspection, and they're in the process of having the folks we work with for DOT to look at it as well, just to make sure that it's as good as it appears to be. But it's the right combination of an older one, but we'll still get 10 years or more out of use out of it. So just need and we have money within their budget this year to purchase it.
I'm just curious, where are we trailing them to?
The tires are hauled to Auburndale, Wisconsin. We pull 20 loads up each year.
Each year? Why couldn't that be accomplished with 2 trailers?
It could be, in large part, the trailers are serving a storage function as well. If it's done with 2 trailers, it requires a lot of extra manpower to move the tires and whatnot.
Right now with 3 sites, the way they've operated in the past is you drop the trailer at the site, and then as they collect tires, the tires go straight into the trailer, and so they're protected. And it's not so much that their tires being recycled; they don't need to be protected from the elements. But on the other hand, we don't need them filling up with animals and debris and everything else. So it's a matter of keeping them clean.
Okay. Should we need a motion first, or can I ask some more?
Oh, sure, go ahead. We're not that far.
Well, I had a discussion just recently with Aaron. We're not making any money. We're losing money on the tires, correct?
Yeah, our disposal fees on the tires are higher than we have budgeted. We have no reason to believe that those numbers
Okay.
should go down. The line item is a different line item than the actual cost of disposing of the tires. And part of the disposal cost perhaps would be driven by exposure to the elements, and then pay by the tonnage to have them processed. So if we have water, snow, et cetera, in with the tires, we're paying for those weights as well.
Okay. Well, could I request that at a future meeting, maybe a near future meeting, you present us with some recommendations so we can begin to break even again until something changes in the market?
Yeah, we've already discussed putting together a change in the fee schedule and finding that right balance between. Obviously, we want to not lose money on the recycling process,
Right.
but we also don't want to put a price that makes it prohibitive and tires end up in ditches instead of in our trailer.
That's what we discussed.
Yeah.
Also, that I don't want to see them tossed in a ditch either, but I hate to see us losing money.
Yeah, separate action, but definitely across the board, we need to relook at the fee schedule.
The whole recycling issue has changed rather dramatically, I guess you could say, in terms of what we can get rid of with and make any money on. True, Steve?
Yeah, I'm still learning the ins and outs of the recycling markets, but yes, if you look at revenues that we were getting for some materials, say 2 years ago, they were more generous than what we are getting in today's market conditions. In terms of updating the board on
Aaron, could you come up here, please? This is getting a little bit longer than we want to do a long-distance conversation with.
I would propose that I would work with the administrator to put together an analysis and maybe a proposal of how we might want to move forward on the funding of the drop sites, rather than coming independent of Sigwood.
Good.
Yeah, okay. Now I suppose there won't be any further questions.
He needed the walk in.
Yeah. He's young enough to be able to do that, so we're okay. Yeah, I guess thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now, I don't think we've had a motion on that one, have we?
No, if it's a budgeted amount, I would move to purchase the trailer.
I'll second it.
I have just one minor question. I'm gathering that it's not enough use on the road to justify a new trailer.
No.
In any way.
No, we certainly wouldn't want the expense of a new trailer. Again, we're using it to haul recycled tires.
Yeah.
But we do want it to be safe and operable on the road, so we
Yep.
want to have the right balance of a used one that's not in bad shape.
Yeah, okay.
And I think we found that.
All those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Now, we saw the CEDA general agreement and grant agreement in our packet. Are there any questions about that?
Is this a 3-year contract? Was this a 3-year or just one? I did one. 1-year contract,
One
okay.
year.
I noticed, I talked about it earlier today, there was a slight discrepancy in dollars. Did that get straightened out?
Yeah, I think so. I was just double checking on the printed copies we have here, but I think we've resolved that.
This one was 38,804, right?
Yeah.
It was the dollars per hour that was under
That's on the
question.
other one here. I'm looking at the wrong one.
Which one was that? Was correct?
Tess?
The agreement for the grant contract for grant writing was the one that the written dollar amount did not match the $62 per hour. That has been since corrected.
Yeah.
Both contracts for the general services up to 14 hours or 14 hours of service per week, plus the grant contract have both been brought up to current date and have been signature execution by Ron Ziegler on behalf of CEDA.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Waiting for that, but all those corrections were made.
Yep. Do we have a motion?
I'll move.
Second.
I feel that we've been getting excellent service in the economic development from CEDA, and the new person that's here seems to be digging in and taking over very, very well. So I'm pleased with it.
Absolutely, and we will have her, I think she's no stranger to the board and anybody here, but we'll have her formally introduced by CEDA at one of the early January meetings.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's hit the ground running.
Yeah. Thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Now, John, would you like to come up and give us a little refresher about what this is all about?
Good evening, Commissioners.
Evening.
You got a number of contracts before you. These are annual contracts that we customarily do. Two of them are agreements that we have with the state of Minnesota that have to do with revenue that comes into Houston County for specific services. That's the Children's Mental Health Respite Care Services Grant and the Comprehensive Adult Mental Health Grant Contract. So those relate to revenue that we receive from the state for those services. All the rest of them are guardianship contracts. Those would be wards, people who've been determined not to be competent, and so then we provide guardianship services for those folks. We've had a lot of change in some of our our guardianship over the last couple of years, because I think I've mentioned before, there was an individual who did a lot of those for Houston County for a good number of years. So you've seen some of these more frequently than you customarily would have. But these are annual agreements now, so we'll see a bunch of those. I may have some more, again, at your next meeting in December. And then we customarily try to mop up all of these annual contracts the end of December, beginning of January. So do you have any specific questions on any of the ones that are in front of you? I can give you more information on those revenue agreements if you'd like.
Do we wanna just do one big motion for all the contracts?
I would suggest that if nobody has an objection.
How are they vetted, guardians?
It's something that we work with, but they're also court appointed.
And the pay?
Pay, I'm trying to recall, I believe it's like $125 a month, something
From?
like that.
From the county?
Yes. So it's a required service that we need to do to provide those guardianship services. Guardians are approved by the court, and so there's a vetting process with that. And then we pay a set fee for those guardianship services. I will say that guardianships cost a whole lot more in other counties, and some counties work with different organizations or even law firms or whatever to provide those services at a much greater rate. We've been fortunate to have folks who will provide those guardianship services to people in Houston County.
Just again out of curiosity, does anyone monitor the program? I mean, we
We're
just assume
involved.
they're gonna do a good job, or
Yeah.
do we?
We're involved with many of those cases through our case management, but also the courts will review those, and if other people who are concerned about, say, a family member or whatever, they can say, concerned about how this guardianship or this guardian is behaving, so.
Okay.
Okay,
Motion to
we need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the human service contracts for 2019.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. Thank you, John.
All right, thank you, commissioners, and congratulations, commissioners Nancy, and your new son.
Thank you.
Approve 2018 through 20 collective bargaining agreements. I'm assuming that we want to take these separately, but I don't know.
Your choice, that's fine. Separately is fine.
I guess I'm asking the negotiating committee if you want to go separately on these or if you want to lump them together.
know that it really matters, does it?
I would go separately on the labor agreements.
Okay.
Okay. So then the first one, Tess?
What I'm,
Yeah, you did, yeah. That's
what I'm handing out is a summary of the changes for the AFSCME agreement, as well as a summary of changes for the two 49ers.
That's fine. For the first local 49ers, the highway folks, essentially in summary, the details of the wage agreement would be a 3% for 2018, 2.75% for 2019, and 2.75% for 2020. 3-year agreement, and there was a strong request for some language regarding the 49ers insurance plan, which we've left the language the same as it is now. So that's to summarize that one. So we'd like to move on that one first, then I can summarize the next one.
That was with the sunset of the CMM health benefits.
That's for the second group. The first group, the highway, has their own insurance through the local 49ers already.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's two groups of 49ers. So.
Okay. Should probably come from the negotiating committee.
Yeah, I'd move to approve the 49ers agreement.
For the operators,
For the highway.
Operating engineers,
there are 249.
right.
Yeah.
Operating engineers, I'm sorry.
I'll second it.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. The next one is the International Union of Operating Engineers, the engineer assistants.
Again, a 3-year agreement with the assistant engineers. Similar wage adjustments across the 3 years: 3%, 2.75%, and 2.75%. And then these individuals are still on the county insurance plan, and so similar to some of the other contracts, they've agreed to sunset the CMM health option as of the end of 2019 as well, and work with us to develop a new plan going forward.
Okay, I would move to approve the agreement with the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 49 Engineer Assistants.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay. American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees Council 65.
Yes. Yeah, we've just heard today that they have ratified the contract on their end as well, so thus we're here for this. Again, on the details of wages, for them, 3% across each year for 18, 3% for 19, and 3% for 20. They have agreed to sunset the CMM health benefits option as well at the end of 2019, and work with us on new plans going forward. And then there's some additional minor language for some clothing allowances for a few of the folks in there as well. And then they have agreed not to not make some of the changes that they had originally proposed to the wage scale and the bandings. So that's kind of where we came out with them.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the agreement with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees Council 65.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. And we move on. Jeff, you have something here, I'm assuming.
Yep. Just turn off the right email that I forwarded to you earlier this afternoon. 1 second. So there's a few categories of the non-elected folks, and several of whom could be in unions if it were not for the fact that they are, by nature of what they do, considered confidential employees. And so the county has always treated them equivalent to
Wait a minute.
to their union counterparts that they would otherwise belong to, across the board for hiring and for everything else. So we recommend that we follow the same position. So for the confidential technician, clerk positions, IT staff, they would be governed by the AFSCME contract and should receive the same as them. So 3% for 18 and 3% for 19. The department heads, our HR, finance, IT, nurses, and the assistant county attorneys would be treated similar to our MAPE contract. And so for them, 3% for 18 and 2.75% for 19 in accordance with that. And then we can discuss the elected separately if you'd like. And you can decide what to do with my position on your own.
In the past, we have treated the confidential, non-union staff the same as the union staff as far as salary changes. That includes like IT department, the
Yes.
nurses,
There's something else besides IT and nurses, isn't there, Jeff? I don't remember.
We've got the assistant county attorneys would be treated like the MAPE employees,
Yeah,
Yeah, assistant county attorney, okay,
and then the department heads, your HR department head, your finance department head, and your IT department head.
HR,
yeah,
and finance also,
Yes.
which is Carol.
okay.
So it
Just-
includes IT, the nurses, the assistant county attorneys, the HR, and finance. HR assistant, right? And finance person.
Yes.
That correct?
Yes. Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Hang on. Tess.
Clarification, in the departments, I believe what I heard, Administrator Babinski say is that it's not the whole IT department being treated like me.
Right.
It's the IT director. It's not the whole HR department being treated like me. It's the HR director, et cetera, going to make them. The other confidential staff will, for the purpose of wages, would be following the AFSCME, proposed AFSCME, not proposed, not ratified
Yep.
AFSCME contract. So it's two different groups.
Okay.
Yep.
So I just want to be careful that, as to what the motion reflects, because it's talking two different pay rates for two different groups.
So it's the IT director.
Yes.
So the
Depart-
D6 ones, the professional, the directors, and the professional employees, the nurses, the directors,
Right. The HR director, finance director, IT director, the nurses that fall into that category, and then the assistant county attorneys fall into that category. And they fall into the category with MAPE.
Administrator, could I ask you one thing?
Yes.
The other contracts were all for, included 2020.
Right.
You mentioned 2020.
I didn't mention 2020 because because these folks aren't under contract. We just left it at 18 and 19. Yeah. That way, the board next year can determine a 2020 salary for them.
And this is a one-year decision, basically. We're only decided salaries for 1 year.
18
Next
and
year we'll
18 and
do it
19.
again.
Yeah.
For 19.
Right.
We simply do my understanding is we simply do 18 and 19 together because this contract theoretically would have been settled about a year ago,
Yes.
and it didn't get settled until now. And so we have to,
Yeah. So we're
I
yeah.
thought
do
we
both
last
years.
December, we did the same thing with the the confidential, non-union. We don't owe for 18. We
Well,
did
this-
this
this
last
is what
December
I'm-
for them.
this is where I'm not clear.
Each year
obviously.
we set it for the next year.
Yeah, okay. then this is
Right.
just for 19 that we're talking,
That's what we,
for these people.
this every December.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I misunderstood. I'm glad I asked the question.
19, what
Yep,
we're deciding
okay,
tonight.
Well, hang on a
fine.
second.
Yeah.
Let me,
We-
let me,
we've
let me
never-
clarify that, because I don't know if the, I mean, I just want, you know, the intent is to treat them the same way we've treated our other employees, and so for the contracted folks, or the union folks, 18 wages were not changed until, now that their agreements are ratified, they will be changed. I'm not aware, and I'll have to
Each
turn to staff
December,
that was
though,
here,
we set-
but I
each
don't
December
think
we-
that the other staff was changed for 18, were they?
No,
Okay.
there were no adjustments to wages.
The only wage adjustments that were approved last December for elected officials.
Yeah. Which is a separate topic we'll come
That's
to.
a completely separate topic.
We
Yep.
did not approve the confidential employees last year?
Nobody did.
We typically
I thought we-
always wait until after we're done with our negotiations.
We do, but since the negotiations are still ongoing, we haven't done anything yet. So every year up until 2018, you're right, we've always done something, but because
Every
we're still in
December.
negotiations, nothing got done last year, that I recall, because we were waiting till negotiations and it didn't get done.
Right.
But you're correct, Teresa, that
We,
usually we
we're
do.
supposed to do it every December for the confidential employees, non-union.
And elected, yep. Mhm.
Well, and part of the issue is the confidential clericals follow the AFSCME agreement, so we can't really take care of that until after the AFSCME agreement is done. For the confidential clericals. And Commissioner, Administrator Levinsky, I just need to ask a point of clarification, because I may have misstated, I heard it two ways. I heard that nurses were going to be treated like NAEP, and I believe that historically we treat them like AFSCME, I'm not sure what you have in there, so.
Okay, well, I apologize if I put them in the wrong group. I thought that's the way they were aligned. Well, if you'd like, how about we table this one for next week, to the next board meeting, and I will clarify that for you.
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
going to suggest that because I spent the entire day today going through some of this, and I'm still got some questions.
Okay.
So
Okay, do we have a motion to table?
I would move to table.
Are you tabling the confidential and the non-unions? Are you
Yeah.
tabling the number 8?
Yep,
Yes.
that's
item,
my
right?
understanding of the motion.
Okay, I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor, well, any further discussion of that? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So we are tabling number 8 until next week for a little more clarification. Number 9, approve salary for elected officials.
All right. Sent a copy of that as well on the same email there. So for the commissioners, I have not heard any discussion further than leaving it at the same amount that it's been. So that currently is $19,016. If you wish to apply the 3% rate increase, that would be $19,586. But I haven't heard how you wish to handle that. The sheriff's salary, we're looking at a 3% there. It keeps his position using the banding guidelines, not solidly on the banding, but using the banding guidelines. 3% would put him at $101,913.97. This is when we compare to other counties, he's on the lower end of the scale for other county sheriffs. The increases that we've seen in the few counties that we have firm numbers for are 4 to 8% raises. So 3% is a little lower than other counties are doing.
I have to.
Just for perspective.
I have to question.
Yep.
What you just said. Got the information from Freeborn County. Albert Lee is bigger than our county, population-wise. That sheriff got a 4.9% raise, which brought him up to $97,020, which is less than our sheriff's making now. So, I'm not sure,
So that's Freeborn? Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And again, this gets extremely difficult because one, can assume, oh, you don't value or whatever, you don't think. I'm, again, trying to be objective here. For 2018, the sheriff of La Crosse County made 108. He's since gotten a raise for, I don't know, for next year or whatever, but nonetheless, in a year when our sheriff was making 98, their sheriff was making 108. There are 100,000 people in La Crosse County. Our young people stream to La Crosse on the weekends. There's nobody streaming to Houston County on the weekends. They probably arrest and jail as many people on a weekend in La Crosse as we house in the jail with help from Winona County. So it just really raised questions in my mind as to how that can be such a close pay issue.
Commissioner, if I could just respectfully comment to the La Crosse
Sure.
issue. It's really not a fair comparison to compare states because all states are different in their training requirements and so forth. Minnesota law enforcement typically is higher paid than Wisconsin because they don't have near the training and licensure requirements that Minnesota does. Same with Iowa, same with South Dakota.
Okay, thank you.
And some of the other comparisons to compare in-state, Dodge County has a slightly larger population, but only by a few thousand, and their sheriff had 99,000 in 2018 and a 3% raise to 102,000 in 2019.
2%?
3% raise as well. Freeborn County, as you mentioned, it was a 5% increase from 18 to 19. Steele County sheriff was recently given a 8% raise from 123 to 132,000. Wabasha County went from 99,000 to 103,000, 4% raise from 18 to 19. And Winona County's sheriff received a 8% raise from 120 to 129,000. And that's after, that's an interesting one to look at because that's actually after several 8 to 10% raises 3 or 4 years in a row.
Okay. And I would just comment that there are 2 universities in Winona and a technical college, and it seems to me that the whole enforcement issue is a bit broader. Actually, I thought of this before number 8, but I would like to table this till next week too. And in fact, I would like to sit down with Mark and discuss this in some detail.
Okay.
But I would make a motion to table it.
Are
All
you-
elected officials or just the
Are you
sheriff?
gonna table all all elected, or
Yes.
just the sheriff?
No, all elected.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to table until next week the approval of salary for elected officials.
And I would comment that to include them all. We had a change from separate auditor and treasurer to combined.
Mhm.
We have a new recorder, so again, I'd like to just look at that and try to come up with the fairest proposal on that. And I appreciate the recommendation, but again, I'd like to, and I will look at it. I'm not just gonna wait till next week and then vote. It's not a stalling tactic. It's, I'd just like to.
Happy to discuss at your convenience.
Yeah.
I think that we only had a couple positions we had questioned about. I think the recorder 2019 actually went down from 2018. Commissioners, I think we seem to agree we are not gonna take a raise this year. Correct.
You're taking that 20% off the board? No, I think that's, goes without saying, yeah.
So,
Yeah, that,
So we could approve a couple of them, and then they can move forward on their budgeting. And then if you wanna table the sheriff, attorney, and auditor treasurer position for more research, could we do that? I mean, this is discussion,
Yeah.
so,
Well, I don't know that a week is going to
make any
make a
difference.
huge difference. I mean, I'll appreciate the week for some of the questions I still would like to discuss with Carol and Jeff and Tess, actually. And like I said, I'd just soon sit down with Mark in particular, but,
Okay.
so I've brought this up before. And I guess now is the best time to talk about it since we're talking about salaries. I want to revisit maybe a change in how we do the elected official salaries. I strongly believe we need to be paying the position, not the person. Okay? Here's what I mean by that. When somebody runs for an elected official office, they're supposed to kind of have an idea of what they're going to get paid. They're running for. They say, I'm going to run for this office. This is what that office is getting paid. This is what I can expect. You know, we had an issue. Mark, I'm going to use you for an example because it's exactly what I'm aiming at. We had an issue when the sheriff first got elected that there was sentiment that, well, because the sheriff coming in doesn't have any experience being a county sheriff, his pay should get reduced. But the problem is, unless you were a sheriff in some other county and moved here, you'll never have experience being a sheriff. But you have experience being a licensed police officer. Now, there are zero requirements outside of the sheriff and the attorney that have to have the credentials in order to hold those positions. You don't need to have anything to be a commissioner or to be a recorder or to be an auditor. Just make the decision and run for it. So the problem that I have is what happened 4 years ago, and I brought it up, was, well, depending on who gets the position will matter of how much the pay is going to be. So the problem then is if you have somebody that ran for an office that did not finish high school in one, so now we're going to pay them less than if somebody had a double doctorate in quantum physics, or somebody that had been a recorder at a different state, moved here and did it again. It should be the position. Now I bring this up, and the reason I brought this up was for the recorder's office. We have a new recorder. I don't believe that, and this is just me talking, but I don't believe that you know, a reduction, say, in a recorder's office because of a new recorder that hadn't been here as long as the other one would make any sense. Because you ran for the same position that somebody else ran for. So you should be getting paid to do the same work that person is doing. With that being said, when we talk about union contracts being 3 years long, I guess in the world that I wish we could live in, when I look at elected officials, I really believe that the best, fairest, honest way to do this is the contract runs until that position is open again. So you would pay the sheriff or the auditor or the recorder, this is the pay you're gonna get for the next 4 years, and when that position is up for re-election, we'll then revisit what that pay is gonna be, so people know what they're running for and how much that position is getting paid. Otherwise, it's like, well, we'll see what you get paid next year. We got to approve that in December, and we'll see who gets the position. That's not really fair, because now it determines on who's running. If this is making sense to anybody. But it should be the position, and that pay should be known that you will get paid X amount of dollars for your term. That's what you can expect to get paid. When that term is up again, we'll reset the budget for the next term, just like we do a contract for the unions. You know what you're going to get expected to be paid over this amount of period of time, and I just think it's too arbitrary when we set salaries each year, and on elected years it changes based on if somebody had been, if Bev had stayed here as a recorder, she'd get X amount of dollars, but then the new recorder wouldn't. But you're doing the same job. So that's my take on things, is pay the position, not the person, and having that contract be the term, so everybody knows what they're getting paid. That's my 2 cents for discussion.
Can I clarify this?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but I think you're correct in no matter who takes that position, the responsibilities don't change, the
Right.
responsibilities don't become less.
Right.
Because you have a new person in that position. But are you then saying that elected official would then work for the same salary for those 4 years straight?
Well, and that's what I'm saying. You either do something where you can say, we're going to set this position at X amount of dollars, and that's taking into account, 3 years worth of an increase. Or you could say we're gonna set the salaries at this, and every year it's going to be an automatic 2% increase. Or you could say, it's flatline. It's going to be 98, and then after the next 4 years, we have increase, and it's been 6% higher. So the next time it's flatlined at this amount. You know what I mean? You can do it either way. I mean, it's 6 one way, half dozen the other. But I'm just saying, whatever you do it for a 4-year set period of time. So if somebody wants to run that position, they know what they're going to get paid, and it doesn't matter who, because you're absolutely right. It's the workload doesn't change. And that's the nature of that position. It's an elected position. This is what you get paid to do this job. Run for it?
I've got one question on that, because if you're going to set that position so that somebody knows what they're running for as far as reimbursement's concerned, you would actually have to set that salary back in a meeting in June or July or May or whatever it is. I can't remember the filing date.
Yep, that's exactly right. And that's what I'm getting at, is setting it prior to that. So
Just so we
before
understand
people
that's where you're
file,
going.
That's exactly right. And that's what I'm getting at, is so when people file, they can say, okay, this is what I know we're going to make. Otherwise, it's arbitrary, and then it's, well, if the board wants to, they're going to cut $20,000 out of everybody's salaries, and, well, wait a second.
I thought it was a state statute that we had to do this in December, but maybe it isn't.
Well, you have to set it, but what I'm saying is you can set it, even if you had to set it every year. But what I'm saying is having that structure, that this is what you're doing. Otherwise,
Jeff?
it's too much arbitrary.
Jeff, could you do some research and see if any other county in Minnesota is following this kind of a model and see how it's working? I don't, I'm not against being a pioneer,
Right.
but on the other hand, if somebody else is doing it this way, I'd kind of like to know how it's working out.
Yeah.
Because it is kind of a radical departure from what we have been doing and from what I see other counties doing, because I keep hearing about, okay, this county raised its sheriff by so much this year and so much last year, and I hear the same thing in some of the other offices. So I'm thinking, this is the norm, okay, and this is, yeah, I'd like to know if there's anybody else doing this.
Well, and I guess too, you know, the other side of this too is that, you know, if you wanted to set a base salary, and you say the base salary is set for 4 years, and if you want to give a raise every 4 years, it's one thing, but to not have a base salary set and known, you know, I don't think it's fair to arbitrarily set it in a complete salary. You know, if we say, hey, for 4 years, yeah. Sure.
I do believe there is a statute that does govern a minimum that you're required to establish on the, I believe, the off year before the elections take place.
There is.
So just be.
But if I remember correctly, it's very, very low. Like a commissioner, I think it's 5,000 or whatever it is. It's extremely low. And that's to prevent people from taking office, showing up for one meeting, and then not showing up again and still getting paid. But it does not set a base salary. It's just a very minimum that you can do. So if somebody doesn't show up for the meetings, you can't just say we're going to pay them $0. No, you got to pay them $5,000, and they just don't show up. But what I'm getting at is having a base salary. I just don't like it when it's arbitrary to say, well, we've got new people that have never sat in these seats, so we're going to reduce the salary by $10,000 or whatever. I don't agree to that. So that's what I'm getting at, is having at least a base salary. If you don't want to do, you know, a raise, or you want to include a raise, that's different. But having something written down so people know what it's going to be, minimum base salary of this, you know, and if for some reason they don't show up, like let's say you had a new county attorney and they didn't end up showing up, well, you can always go down to what the state law is, you know, for that reason. But as long as they're doing their work, you can expect to get paid a minimum of this amount. So that's all I'm getting at.
I like the idea of looking at the salaries each December and deciding, I mean, even our recorder is coming in with 19 years of experience. Why shouldn't we evaluate her compared to recorders in other counties and you know, and same with sheriff. We compare to counties our size.
That's right, but we don't compare to sheriffs and recorders' years of experience. We're comparing the sheriffs and recorders what they're getting. So that's where I'm saying we can compare the position, but not the person. And I've always had an issue with that with an elected position. I get when it's a salary deal and you're paying them and you go out and you advertise for this position, and it depends on how much experience they have. Here's the requirements we need. Elected officials don't have any requirements. So if you're 19 and right out of high school versus somebody that has been a senator for 16 years, do we pay more because they've got governing experience than the other? No, this is what the position is. You ran for it, you won, congratulations, that's what you get. And that's what I'm getting at, you know, is it's not based on the person, it's based on the position. This is what we pay. What's that?
You might not get anybody that'll want to run if we set a base salary of the sheriff for $50,000.
No, you'd set the sheriff. What I'm saying right now is if the sheriff is at $98,000, you'd say for 4 years you're going to get at least a base salary of $94,000, and you may get a raise in December each year. But to say, oh well, the sheriff got paid $98,000, but now somebody new came in, so we're only going to pay you $87,000. Why? Why? So that's what I'm getting at, is setting that base salary. If we say that base salary is just what you're getting paid now, fine. But I just think it needs to be something looked at. We don't have anybody up for election, obviously, for 2 more years. But we're going through salary, something just to keep in our hip pocket to look at. That I don't like the arbitrary, depending on who gets the position, how much you get paid. That's what I'm getting at.
And I'll just throw a little kerosene on the fire here too. Moving forward, since we have settled contracts, it has no bearing for the next 3 years, but I'm not a real fan of the step issue, because with a 3% raise and then a step, some people are getting 6 or more %, which again, I'd like to see out in the private sector, those kinds of raises. It doesn't
Do the
happen.
elected officials have steps? Or are they
I
just
don't know.
salary what we decided?
No, I don't think it-
Currently, you use the salaries that are voted and decided
By
on.
the
You
union.
you have in the past used the banding as a guideline and rationale for the positioning and the salaries that you've set in the past. But you're not locked to the banding schedule at all. That's just there for your guidance.
Well, and that's, I guess what I'm getting at too, is, you know, if you have elected officials on the same banding as somebody else, because you sat in the chair for 9 years, you'd have gotten paid more than somebody else, you know,
Yeah.
elected officials are a different animal than a normal employee is, you know. And you're right, Jack, if you're doing increases plus steps, it
But
goes
we're
up
not
real
doing
fast.
steps.
No, but for employees in
For
general.
employees in general, I'm talking. I'm just saying, we're locked 3 years. I mean, nothing's, I would just like to begin to discuss some of that. I'm not,
Or
Huh.
having it where you get steps, and if you don't get steps, you get X amount of percent increase.
right,
But getting both of them is kind of double dipping, is what you're saying.
is what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
But that's for
Another day.
2 years from now.
Yeah.
More or less, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And maybe we need to start
Probably
next
less.
year on this.
Yeah.
Okay, we digress.
Well,
Okay, we have a motion. don't
you've
we?
got a motion to table it. We can sit down with the personnel committee tomorrow or in the coming days to go through it.
And there was some talk about eliminating some positions from that motion, but
That was just discussion.
that was just discussion, and that's not going to be a part of the motion, so we can go on with the motion then. Am I right?
Eliminating position.
Well,
No,
eliminating positions
I said
from
to
the
table it.
motion of
Yeah. Teresa
waiting.
said, why don't we do recorder and auditor instead of tabling the whole thing?
Oh, yeah.
I just assumed table the whole thing.
We're in agreement more or less. We want to vote on the idea of tabling the entire discussion of salary for elected officials. That's my understanding of the motion.
That's,
Yes.
that's the
Okay.
intent of the
Fine.
motion.
Yep, okay. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
I almost did that to make it a tie vote to see what would happen, but I decided not to.
You're mean, Fred.
Yeah, I know. Okay, item 10. Approve 2019 Board of Commissioners meeting schedule.
I think we have to do that at our first meeting in January, so should this just be discussion at this point? Don't we set our meetings up the first meeting in January, right? I mean, that's what we've done in the past.
That's what we've done in the past, yes, I understand that.
I thought we did the meeting days now, so you knew when you were gonna have your first meeting.
Well, yeah, you've got to know when your first meeting is, so you got to do something.
But we always wait till
Yeah.
January because then we'll have a full board again. It could be different people with different
Yeah.
opinions. You
Yeah, there's
you
a
know,
Yeah.
instead of setting it here for the
Yeah, I
next year's
understand.
commissioners, in case we would have had all new commissioners, you know.
So then, really,
I mean,
what?
I would be
yeah.
willing to discuss it, but I don't know if we can actually set the meeting days till January is what I
Yeah.
would say.
Logically, what you're saying is the only thing that we really should try to set tonight would be the first meeting in January, since there will obviously be a different person in that chair.
Right.
And see, and the problem is you're gonna have nobody in three representing three when they wanna meet though, until February.
Yeah, they're going to have to be stuck with
Yeah, but
it. Sorry.
that's always been on the agenda for the first meeting to, you know, set our committees, set our meeting dates, and we already have the 8th set
Yeah.
for our first meeting in January. But I'd be willing, I would like to discuss it,
Yeah.
the suggestions.
Yeah, as long as it's on the agenda, I think it would be appropriate to discuss the proposed schedule. I'm kind of wondering if we, the four of us shouldn't, in my opinion, the four of us probably shouldn't really set the entire year's schedule in stone at this point, because there would be input from a different person. Does that,
And we could.
because my recollection is, as Teresa says, we really haven't ever done that before that first meeting in January.
That's what I feel. I
Yeah.
feel we need to wait till the first meeting in January.
To
Because
set-
you could
to
have
set
had
the
an all
whole year.
different board. I mean,
Yeah.
really.
Michelle's looking at
And
it.
I hate to set the schedule for them.
If it helps, the incoming commissioner has reviewed the schedule and is in agreement with it.
I think we,
I'm
It's a
sorry,
hard
did you say
time
that
to-
he did look at it and was in agreement with it?
Yes.
So,
Because technically, I don't think we have
I don't.
schedule for the 8th yet, that,
That's what I'm wondering, if we have done that.
so,
We at least have to do that at some point. We gotta do it either tonight or else next week, to set a schedule, to make sure that we actually have a meeting on the 8th, legally.
well, there isn't, yeah, well, there isn't a state statute or anything that says you have to do it the first meeting of the year.
No,
I mean,
you can do it whenever you feel like doing it, in my opinion, but.
No, but we need to make sure that we have it, is it 10 days in advance, because, you know, we do have to put out the public notice of the meetings.
What, so what was the schedule? No evening meetings, so only 2 meetings a month? Or-
you wanna review,
Jeff, would you review the schedule for next year so that everybody understands what we're talking about?
Yeah, so in principle, it would be, with a couple of exceptions based on holidays and things, it would be essentially the first and third Tuesdays of each month at 9:30 would be the full board meeting. And so we would have 2 full board meetings a month with activity. And then, with the proposal that on off weeks, and not necessarily every off week, but we would front load it, we would have time for work group sessions where we could have more of an informal discussion with the board through topics. For example, starting the beginning of the year with policy review, some training for the incoming commissioners, once we have the full board in February, using that as our time for strategic planning for the board. And then later, when we get into the you know, the schedule of the year, later in the year, that would be used for budget meetings and preparing the, you know, the following year's budget and things.
So you'd still have meetings every week, just only 2 would be public meetings?
Right. We wouldn't necessarily have a meeting every week, but we would have the formal 2 meetings.
but they'd all be public.
They would all be public,
Well,
yes, yeah. But the two meetings a month would be when we would bring actions to the board would take action, make motions, et cetera. And then the off times when we meet would be more of a working group session and not a decision-making meeting.
similar to our strategic planning.
Right. Yeah, in the past, you've done strategic planning once every few months. This would just give us the opportunity to set those meetings up more regularly.
Now, the schedule that you printed out or emailed to us shows a very thin schedule on these alternate Tuesdays for some of the rest of the year.
Yeah.
But what I think I'm understanding is that we probably are going to meet a fair number of those, but we don't know what the topic will be at this point, so there's no point in filling it out. We
Right,
don't know
yeah, I
how,
left
we don't know
that
how many
open
meetings
so
a
we
month
could-
we'll
we
need,
could-
et
We
cetera.
could solidify when you would be having the,
Yeah.
you know, the public, the
record.
meetings like this, the meetings of record. And then at those early sessions, you know, when one of those, for example, early in January, having one that addresses strategic planning, that's when you could lay out when and how often you'd want to meet with those work group sessions.
Now,
Yeah,
I gotta say,
okay.
doesn't matter to me. But, remember when we put the schedule together that we had on this one, where we said we're only gonna meet 3 times? There's an awful lot of people saying, oh, well, you're not gonna get enough business done, because it's hard enough to get everything done when we have 4 meetings a month, and you're gonna cut one out, and one's an evening meeting. How are we gonna get all this work done? And now you wanna cut it back yet one less meeting than that. So to all the naysayers that hated it the first time, how are you defending cutting it back even more?
That's what Winona County did. They cut it to 2 meetings a month when they had an administrator. And Jeff does save us a lot of time usually at our meetings, so maybe that's an advantage of having an administrator cutting it to 2 meetings a month. I know quite a few counties are going to 2 business meetings a month, and then deciding among the commissioners if they want to have a meeting in the off weeks, they decide at the meeting.
Right, well, and I know that there was a lot of department heads that were screaming, well, if we've got documents that need to get signed and the board only meets, you know, and then there's a gap, and then when we were only gonna meet 3 times, but then there was a 5th Tuesday, we had that off, then, well, there's 2 weeks, and how are we gonna get documents signed and do all this? So, just trying to play the devil's advocate, because we got drilled on this.
One of those changes that needs to happen is to put into policy some of the things that are, frankly, that are in my contract to do, that you've asked me to take on and manage as the administrator. We currently don't have in policy yet that, right now, some of the policies that still stand are every purchase up to $1,000 still come to the board for a decision on. That's one of those policies that we need to relook at and change that amount so that the board isn't being inundated with that minutia, that stuff that we can happen, that stuff, I mean, you're paying a sheriff a lot of money, you're paying directors a lot of money to make decisions, and those are decisions that they ought to be able to make within an appropriate set of guidelines, and not have to come to the board for every decision on. And so if we can do that, that's one of the ways that we can make that work out.
Okay, one of the things Justin touched on was, this needs to be signed. Just because we designate it as a working day and it's public, can we not sign something on a off Tuesday?
I don't know if, see, that would be the question, is if do you have to, and I don't know this for sure, but have a posted agenda if you're gonna be signing something, so people know that document's getting signed, so they can't say, well, wait a second.
Yep.
You signed that, you didn't let the public know that was on, I don't know.
Yeah.
On a
we will
it's informal, because by state law, you can do that, you can have retreats and you can have informal things, but decisions cannot be made unless it's a posted meeting. So,
And we would comply with all of that if we, the ones I put in there are examples of what we would be doing at those working group sessions. And so, in accordance with all the open meeting laws, we would publish an agenda on those meetings beforehand, just like we do now for the strategic planning sessions.
Well, and I'd like
and
to
then it would
see
be-
things, quite frankly, come to us earlier than a lot of times they have.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like we need this signed by Tuesday, or by Thursday. Well, then you should have come last week, I guess, and we've been very forgiving, I guess, and I'd just soon tighten that up.
And we did have an agenda for our strategic planning meeting. We did have one where we could have made a decision if we needed to, because it was on the agenda.
Michelle tells me that traditionally, oh boy, I don't want to do that, but traditionally we have not set the meeting schedule until the first meeting in January. The first meeting in January just miraculously happened. We didn't schedule it back in the end of December. It just, okay, we meet Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, the first Tuesday in January. It happened without doing anything about it ahead of time. I would assume that the world will continue to revolve if we don't.
But Fred, you're going to say that one day the earth won't revolve. I'll say, Fred.
It quit.
Well, and you can just set the meeting for January and say, we set that meeting and the rest of it
Yeah.
can be discussed.
Discuss it on the 8th.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think this was good discussion. We got a feeling of what everybody's thinking. And I do like the idea of the strategic planning, because we do discuss things
To
that
be honest with you, I
don't need
think
to be
that's more productive.
between us for
Yeah.
communication.
Okay.
Okay. So then I think what we're doing is basically tabling the Board of Commissioners meeting schedule until,
First meeting in January.
okay. Did we have a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion to table discussion on our meeting schedule till the January 8th at our first business meeting.
Now, do you need to formally adopt that as the first meeting of 2019 though?
Well, it was in
It's
the
all-
motion that we meet on January 8th.
8th, yes,
That was part of that motion, if you'll let us get
Right.
by with that.
yes.
Well, that's what I'm asking is
Yes.
record-wise, do you need to set the January meeting and then set, we're tabling this until the January meeting, if you're doing it the proper way?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter,
Yeah, okay.
so, whatever.
You probably need to put a time on that too while you're doing it. If we're gonna do it at 9:30, well, we're going to have to,
So
do it at
you're looking for
9:30.
two separate motions, and a motion to table our meeting schedule till January 8th at 9:00 a.m. for a regular business meeting.
Okay, you wanna make it 9 o'clock instead of 9:30
I like
then?
9 o'clock.
Pardon me?
I like 9 o'clock.
Okay, you're making the motion. If somebody wants to amend it, they can amend it. We'll see if it gets a second.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? We'll see if we pull an amendment out of that. Okay, we didn't. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried.
I abstain because it really is irrelevant for me.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, consent agenda. Jeff?
Yeah, so we have two HR actions going forth. First is to affirm the change of employment status of Naomi Ho, appraiser trainee from probationary to regular, effective December 18th, 2018, on her anniversary. The second is to affirm the carryover of 27.43 accrued vacation hours in excess of the maximum allowable carryover for 2018 to 2019 for Michelle Quinn. She wasn't able to lower her vacation accruals this year due to the extra circumstances placed on her with assuming position. Which we
I would
appreciate.
move to approve the carryover and, in addition, thank her for really stepping up when we had some tough times at that particular juncture.
And I would like to have her cross-trained for Tuesdays to take our minutes.
I'll second it.
And now Fred disappeared.
Aren't you the vice chair?
Who's the vice chair?
Aren't you?
I'm like, I think, huh?
No, we can wait a
You
second.
can be for today.
Should we just
So I think
call
Ms.
for the
Walter
vote?
is.
You can wait a second.
Yeah.
The other two items on the consent agenda do not require any action taken by the board. They're information only. Sent you a copy of the a grant request that we've submitted through Conservation Corps Minnesota. It's essentially an add-on to our other request through MDA for work on eradicating Japanese hops. So it's just an add-on grant for that process. And then the third one is in your packets, you had some updates on the 2018 storm event and the financials for how all that worked out.
We have some really strange things happen occasionally in this county.
Mhm.
Where did Houston County, Minnesota, come up with Japanese hops?
Probably the same place Asian beetles came from.
Yep.
It's just, and I don't know, well, you'd have a good idea. Do you know what they are? Do you have them around
No.
your farm at all?
They're mainly by the river. I don't
Yeah,
know.
the Japanese hops is an invasive species down by the waterfront.
That's one where we talked about using the
Yeah.
eradicator that was not real.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
So you need a motion to approve the consent agenda, so move.
Well, we have another,
Yeah, you had already moved yeah. The two items don't, the items 2 and
Okay.
3 don't require any motion, so yeah.
Okay.
You've already made a motion for the first one, you're just waiting on Commissioner Arnold to return.
yeah, I'll call this home, see whether he went home.
So we actually approved the change of employment status?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the accrued vacation, yeah.
And,
Okay.
yes.
We've discussed, where we're at is just a vote on whether to affirm the employment of Naomi.
Yep.
Well, and affirm the carryover vacation for Michelle.
Yep. And
Right.
it's been moved and seconded.
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. Root River Early Detection Rapid Response Grant.
Yeah, we've
Jeff
got,
talked about that. Neither needs to be voted on, he said.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Okay. And then you've done the number 3 there?
Yeah.
Okay. So, we're down to discussion items.
It's you, Teresa.
Is that me? Okay.
We'll start there.
Well, last Thursday I had our meeting for Family Collaborative, which is 4 school districts. The superintendents were there and a member from each of their boards. Also includes Hiawatha Mental Ed, is that right?
Yeah, mental health, yeah.
Department, and also includes the Department of Corrections and our Human Service Director, which used to include Public Health, so he's covering for both right now. Of course, state funding has been cut, as we know. We used to get about $150,000 a year to be divided between the school districts based on population of the school district, and now it's down to about $74,000. So it's really, but they're gonna try and, at this time, stay within that 74 to 80,000 range of spending, not spend and hope that we would get more. And their next meeting is January 24th, so that's one of the committees we definitely have to make sure we have somebody assigned to before then, so. Then I had the solar meeting today, that was very interesting. Got a lot of information, few questions pop into your mind after you hear all that, so I got a few notes going for that. I went to the public safety meeting at the AMC conference, and Mark is right, Minnesota has mandated training for 10,807 peace officers throughout the state. They have to get CEUs, and it's all mandatory. Right now, they're getting about $6 million a year for the next 2 years, and they're hoping that can go toward training across the whole state, so.
I would mention too that there's new training for rape victims,
Yes, that's one of their top priorities.
and that every department
Sexual assault.
needs to be trained.
Use
in-
of force and child protection were their top training areas.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was very interesting, some of the things that the state's working on and the sheriffs of Minnesota. Those were my 3 meetings this past week.
Did you get a call from that woman down in the water? Did I give her your name?
Justin,
Mm-hmm. Nothing, everything I had, we already kinda covered.
Again, I was pleased with the solar presentation today, coming in pretty naive about the whole process, but some good questions, good comments, good information, and some people to contact. Tess shared that there's a person coming down that's been talking to the city of Caledonia, and someone made a comment, or maybe more than one, that it would be a real feather in our hat if Houston County would be kind of a shining star for solar usage in the state of Minnesota, or around the Midwest, even if we, but I'm getting ahead of us here. We need to gather a lot of information and find out just exactly what we can do and can't do, so.
Real quick, I want to add to that, something that I just thought of. When looking at a new highway department building, current infrastructure here in the county, I was looking at Tesla's website, and they've got industrial battery packs for commercial buildings to run buildings for up to 7 days without power. Okay. Now, looking at that, when I look at the new jail, we bought a gigantic generator. I think it's 1,100 horsepower, and it'll run half of Caledonia. But every time we run it, it costs us like $70-some an hour to run this thing. And then we've got all this maintenance cost that every year we got to do all this maintenance fees and all this kind of stuff. You know, throwing this out there that, you know, depending on what these battery packs cost, there's no maintenance to it, and it basically is a generator. It, you know, has energy stored for up to 7 days. I don't know if we've ever in the history of Houston County had a power outage for more than 1 or 2. But looking at that as being a possibility, especially on a new building, is doing something like that. You can incorporate the solar panels and the battery packs, and then stepping out even further, you could actually sell the generator and probably get more money than what those battery packs cost. You don't have the yearly fees that are associated with it. So I would encourage you strongly, when looking at alternative energies, that you look into the Tesla industrial battery packs, just is an option, and then a generator, because it's kind of, generators are expensive, and then you always worry about, well, is it going to start? Well, batteries are there, and they're always charged, they're top charged all the time. So anyway,
Okay.
I wanted to bring that up, that
Thank you.
look into that.
I have just one other, and this would be a question for Carol. Also in the Minneapolis Tribune today, they're talking about the whole Minlars disaster that we've gone through for the last year, and indicating that other licensing centers want some reimbursement from the state for overtime, etc. Do you know did we incur excessive costs versus other years, or?
Michelle actually has the request for information that they sent out, and we're looking at it to see, and it deals differently with, you know, the amount of revenues that we collected the prior year as compared to the year with that, the labor costs, the additional out time.
Yeah, that's
They have a whole list of things that they're looking for to do comparisons.
that's exactly what the article focused on. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's all.
I attended a planning commission meeting last Thursday night, and there were a couple of, well, the one thing I should talk about very briefly, the shooting club that the Spring Grove School has. It's a competitive trap shooting thing. They are trying to establish a trap range where there used to be a trap shooting range out where on the north side of 44 by the quarry, north side. And they came asking for a CUP, and after some discussion, they decided that an interim use permit would be a little bit more appropriate for what they need to do. So that has gone back, and they'll bring an interim use permit next time
That makes more
That we-
sense.
that we meet.
Something like that, yes.
And other than that, I really don't have anything. So we are ready for, oh, wait a minute, excuse me, closing public comment. Okay.
So Diane Schultz from Caledonia City, and I'm an AFSCME member. So just a couple of things I want to talk about as I look at some of my notes. First of all, I just want to say thank you for approving the AFSCME contract. It's been a long process. There's been a couple of things I want to clarify as well, and I've talked to Mr. Miller about a couple of them in saying that in one of the previous comments made at a board meeting, and I looked this up, according to the Commissioner's mission, we are committed to providing exceptional citizen service at all time. With that being said, that is how we as employees have also felt. Our presentations through the past several months have been to show and educate you about the greatness and the skills present in the employees and how retention is the goal. With that knowledge, then I agree with your statement you made. Since we are a county agency and do not manufacture any type of product outside the business of serving the residents of Houston County, then it is obvious that I would agree that wages and benefits would be a huge portion of the budget. I also want to share that we have been negotiating since October of 2017. It is through meetings, discussions, and that proposals are reviewed, information shared, wage comparisons presented, budgets reviewed, needs discussed, and agreements made through a negotiating process. It is a conversational versus making demands, as the board members have alluded to in some of the conversations. I will agree with you, Justin, that it was last October 2017. You did bring up the conversation about the elected officials coming in, so you have talked about it pretty consistently and regularly, that individuals coming into positions should know what they are going into. We did have some conversations, as I alluded to at that time, that in the past, as you had said, Mr. Miller, some individuals come in and say, I want this, and I want that. And so that's where a conversation of over a year ago did occur. So I will agree with you on that as well. And that, as previously mentioned, AFSCME members have been negotiating since October of 2017. And I find it confusing with tonight's conversation and hearing at other times comments about wages, compensations, comparable worth, etc. for non-represented positions and elected officials, but the county sometimes hasn't taken into consideration the same counties when comparing wages for the AFSCME employees covered under a collective bargaining agreement. It appears the county does not follow a consistent process throughout the county. At times we have heard the comment, the non-represented individuals want what the union settled for. Again, I heard that tonight. We want what the unions have negotiated for. I also want to remind you that there are 5 unions in the county. Some of the unions have 5 steps. Many of them have 9 steps. And I'm confused as to why it's the AFSCME union, as we're talking about in comparable for wages in the negotiating process, when, as I said, there are other unions. I also want to take into consideration that AFSCME has probably one of the lower scaled ends of employees, and when you talk about percentage increases to non-represented individuals, and you tag on an average pushing of 100,000 at 3%, their income would be significantly higher than an employee in AFSCME with a 3% increase. We're talking $3,000 a year versus maybe $25 a week added on. So there is a big discrepancy into some of the.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes.
I'm confused when you're referencing AFSCME. Are you talking about my comment about steps, or?
Well, a little bit of both.
Because I didn't signal out I didn't single out AFSMI. I just-
Correct.
Okay.
But you talked about unions, and I was confused as to what union you're talking about, because there are 5 unions in the county. And when we talked
I
about.
don't remember saying you, I may have, but
Well,
my
But I
point,
believe all unions or employees, most of them have some sort of steps or
yeah,
step
I just
increases.
Correct.
referenced, I
That's
just,
what
yeah.
the conversation
Right, I
was.
just
Correct.
referenced
In
the-
general.
the
Correct.
step in general, yeah, you're
Correct.
right.
And we're talking, and that's where we're, when you talk about comparable wages, because I did hear tonight that the other unions, each union got different percentages. So my question too is, why was it the ASME union for some of these positions, as far as the percentages that were being requested and being granted? You've tabled it, you can have discussion on that next week or during this following week.
Well, let's clarify that, because I'm kind of confused, and Tess, maybe you can answer that a little bit better, because, you know, we talk about, you'd asked why are there certain steps for certain unions that are different, 5, 9, 7?
That was just a statement. I said that there are, in the comparables that you've talked about, you made comparisons that in conversations, it has been historically given that they get the same as the unions. Couple of questions here is why is it selected as AFSMI? Are you specifically talking about AFSMI when you represent it? Or are you talking about the other unions? Because when you say typically we give the same as what the other unions get.
Tess clarified that a little earlier, and that's because there were certain individuals that are on the same AFSMI, correct? Tess, what you were saying?
Comparable, correct. But I'm talking about, per se, some of the other ones that you are also tabling for next week.
Oh, yeah, the
You
other
know,
positions, I get what you're saying. Yep.
Yes. And those individuals who might be a comparable have no option to participate due to their roles, currently at this time, but,
So you were wondering, when we're talking about those positions, which union we're comparing to, is what you're asking?
well, I'm just making a statement, because you're talking about, there was 2 separate ones. The confidential non-union, and then 9 is elected officials, because that was a statement, you're paying them comparable to the unions.
The statement was that was not for the elected folks, elected positions compared to unions. The statement was that for the non-elected folks, non-unions members that are in our confidential status, those are the folks that we have traditionally compared, or are treated like union members, except that they can't participate in the unions because of their confidential status.
There was one
So-
group in there that was compared, is not confidential, and their role has been changed, but that can be for another discussion.
Okay.
Can I, go ahead.
Just to make a responsive statement for clarification, if it helps. In addition to the confidential folks that you are correct, can't be here because the definition of confidential is their role exposes them and have duties and obligations to be either involved in or have access to collective bargaining information during that process, so they can't be involved. They are covered generally by the agreement, but not in union. In addition to that, for I believe, if I'm not putting words in commissioners or administrators' mouth, but I believe when we talk about past treatment, and Carol can maybe clarify that too, we looked at trying to treat our employees very similar to each other for equitable purposes as well as for pay equity purposes. And so that is where that history has come forward. This year we have a different situation with different settlement rates of settlement for our wages, so we're still looking at what would be equitable that would keep us passing muster, if you will, with our pay equity and our comp work. And for that reason, there's certain classifications of employees that we are recommending to be treated similarly, maybe to make, and others to be treated similarly as to ASME, just simply because of that, the pay equity component, as well as general equitable perspective.
That kind of makes sense?
That makes better clarification, because what I had heard before is that some of the positions were, that specific clarification was not being made, and when they talked about the unions, because MAPE's in a union, and so some of those.
Well, you make a good point that we probably did not classify, and generally we use unions plural.
Yes.
But as was right in the past, a lot of times it's been the unions, all of the unions have usually gotten the same pay, but now, an increase like 2 across the board.
Correct.
Because it's different now, you're right, one union's at this, one union's at this, which one are you picking?
Correct.
And I think that's gonna be the discussion next week is,
Correct.
okay, this is what the average across the board of all unions are getting, you know what I mean? It's gonna be that discussion.
Correct.
You're
And
right.
so
You're right.
I was happy and I was sad that you tabled it, because with your changing of your attendance, with no longer having evening meetings, it makes it more difficult for a working individual to attend the meetings, having to request vacation or maybe not being allowed shortened blocks. So it does limit the John Q. public from coming, and I understand that attendance has been lower, but the positive thing about it is I do know that many individuals watch the recordings and gain input from that. So that is a very good thing. Just one other statement, and I'm going to end with this comment made by you, Mr. Arnold, at the 210 meeting that says, "A cornerstone of any organization is people who stay for a long period of time and do their jobs and do them well. That's what enables us, a county agency, to function." So thank you for that.
Thank you. Now, one question I have for you. It was my understanding that we were negotiating, the negotiating committee was negotiating with 7 unions.
Okay, 7? Is there 7?
You lost track of a couple.
I know, I beat too many. My apologies for that. And with that, I want to talk about that. I heard several times tonight, I heard from the administrator talking about county comparisons, and that is too what we used as ASME. We tried to pull in county comparisons, the same ones that have historically been utilized by looking for new recruits, for positions. I heard you talk about Winona County being pulled in. I heard you mention a couple of counties, and we used that same strategy during our negotiations, and we did pull that back into a conversation during one of our meetings as well.
Problem is and as we discussed in negotiating, is that there is no one set comparison. We can't say that every time that using the 10 counties in the district, minus Olmsted obviously, is an appropriate comparison all the time. So there are times when comparing it by population size is maybe an appropriate comparison, and there are times when comparing it by taxable income is an appropriate comparison. There's not always a right answer to what the appropriate comparison is.
There is never a right answer. There's always another question. There's always another response. It's kind of like percentages and statistics, and I agree, and we will save that for another day of good discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Okay.
I'd make a motion to adjourn.
Quick, somebody second it.
I'll second it.
Okay. Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. We are officially adjourned. Thank you.